Just give a little bit more background about how the project got started. I'm always looking for competitions for students to get involved in, and this Save Earth game competition popped up on my radar, and the thing that attracted me about it the most initially was that Phase 1 only required a concept document. You didn't have to do anything more than that, and so that made it suitable for a Game 101 class assignment. And out of that, Ian DiCarlo's concept was chosen as the winner, and at that point it was months past its date that it was supposed to have been judged by, and well, I guess that means that it's actually live still. So Phase 2 is build a playable game, let's do it. And even though my course schedule, my loading last semester was already too much, I added yet one more course just specifically for this project. Because it got added very late, there weren't too many people that knew about it, and so I had to go recruit a bunch of people. And thinking back on those students who had demonstrated their seriousness about being here and doing good work, I then looked up their schedules to make sure that they had time and couldn't say no to me. And so then I went and tapped on a few shoulders and got them to sign up for the class, and I'm very happy I did. These guys have really made the school proud. And in contrast with the Trade Secret team, who also did quite well, one of the main differences between the two teams, Trade Secret started with a core group of people who had already worked together and knew each other. Tellus didn't. Most of these guys didn't really know each other that well when they started, and yet they still pulled off something very incredible, and that is due to their professionalism. They took this game seriously, they worked hard, and they held each other accountable and did a great job. So I will turn it over to them.
Thank you, Professor Westman. I'm Ian DiCarlo, the original concept and lead designer on Tellus, and I'm just going to talk about how this concept became reality. It started, like he said, as an assignment in my Game 101 class in my second semester here at the school, this is a screenshot of the website for the contest, and the first mission is to just create a game design concept, write up a brief document, and submit it. So me and a group, well, at first we did trials in the class. We wrote up our concepts, and then we selected from those which ones we're actually going to flesh out and submit. And mine won. I think we were split into 4 groups, and I was one of those groups that my concept got selected for. So then what we did was me and 4 other people got together, and over the course of, I think, 2 weeks, it was kind of a midterm assignment, we wrote up a 5-page, very succinct game design document, and we submitted that document. And that was the last I heard of it for a year and a half. It wasn't until 2 summers later, when I was at E3, I got this phone call from this guy who was saying, "Hey, I'm calling you about the Save the Earth game to let you know that your team was selected as the winners of the first contest." And I'm like, who is this? What are you talking about? Because I didn't remember. It had been so long ago. I think 5 semesters had passed. And we kept talking, and then I was just kind of like, oh, and my eyes, well, the person who was with me said, "Your eyes got really, really big." And I just had the light bulb turned on. I'm like, oh, that thing, yeah. So when I got back from E3, the first thing I did was I found Professor Westman and said, "You know that assignment you had us do in Game 101? And he's like, "Yeah, I remember." Well, my concept apparently won, and they invited me to participate in the second contest, which was to take that design concept and actually create it as an actual game. So, like he said, he went around and he pulled a bunch of people he knew were doing well in their classes, worked hard, kept their commitments, and he threw us together and we sat down and said, "Okay, we have 1 month before they want the first proof of concept that is somewhat playable, actually working in the engine." So we're like, okay. So we sat down and we just worked really, really quickly, but also and we put in a lot of time so that we could make that deadline. And it wasn't the most polished thing, but we sent them something for consideration for the final judging process, which we were accepted into. They said, okay, yeah, you're now in the finals for the second contest, and in, I think we had another month and a half, 2 months, we want your, your alpha, or your fully playable, maybe not all that polished. So we had to do, we had all these goals that kept us focused, and kept our scope down. And we made some hasty decisions that we went back and revised later, a lot of balancing, but at the time we need to get stuff in there, we need it working, we needed to prove that we have these ideas and that we can implement them. So we didn't really have too much scope creep because of that, I think, because we stayed focused. And after that, one of those deadlines was the GDC pitch we made here at the school, which we rehearsed a lot. We went over our presentation 2 or 3 times, and then we got up there. We all knew what we were going to say, how long it was going to be. Tyler made a video, one humorous one and one more serious one, and we really gave it our all, and we showed off what we had at that time, which at that point was something like this, maybe a little less polished. Evan, you want to talk a little bit about the design?
Yeah, I came in the beginning of the semester, basically right into crunch time, because at that point they'd already made their GDC pitch, and so they were working on building their alpha into something actually playable and at least a little bit polished to show off at GDC. I came in, there wasn't a whole lot of research. I mean, there had been research that was done, but it didn't really pertain so much to that. One of the other designers, who's no longer on the team, he came in with a whole bunch of research from a different project that he thought would kind of fit in with this, and it didn't really do that. So I had to go in and research a whole lot about power plants, a whole lot of all things, because part of the objective in this is, you build up all your buildings and you have to power all of them by efficient means and by being able to actually have renewable resources of energy. A lot of that you could see how it would be a bit difficult to design around this, because other games, you could just say, here's an arbitrary number, we'll mold it from there. But we wanted to base our game roughly around real life expectations so that people could actually learn from the game. And that's one of the big things that we really wanted to have in this game, is that people could actually learn from this and hopefully better the Earth, in a certain amount of time, both in the game and in real life. By just wanting all of these things. And so one of the things, there's a lot of hard things to research in these. One of ours is you can demolish buildings to make way for new buildings. But in order to do that, you have to have a demolition time. Those are not easy to find. It's just not something that the public usually looks for, and so it's just not readily available out there. So there are obstacles like that. We also had problems, early on whenever I joined the team, we started out, you would get money each year. So at the end of the year, December, as soon as it turned into January, you would get a set allotment of money depending upon how many buildings you had built during, over the course of your gameplay. We changed that. We thought, no, you're getting money too slow. And so we changed that to every month. And every month is, a month goes by every 5 seconds. Problem is that we just took our, our allotted amount and divided it by 12. But we didn't really realize that there would be remainders on that. And so as I played through the game, I realized we're losing money here, because we divided this into 12 and we just kept dropping remainders. So sometimes you would get as much as 11 credits dropped every single year. And that just made the game unplayable. It was incredibly slow that way. You wouldn't be able to build anything, and you just weren't able to win. We dallied about with a few different ways. Our first our first way to balance that was just, okay, increase all the production of everything, which did the opposite effect. It gave us way too much money. And way too much money, people beat the game really early, and it's just no more fun. So we had to have our programmer actually rewrite our entire equation on how things were generated, how money was generated. And so it actually keeps all of the remainder money, and at the end, whenever it comes to a whole number, it will give you that whole number while keeping whatever is still in the remainder. So that's one of the specters that I had to come across while game designing. This is actually our IndieDB website, and this is our true website for Tellus. They were put together. The website was put together by Sean, wasn't it? Oh, it was actually David. And our IndieDB site was thanks to Tyler Coleman over there. I think that's about all for design, so I'll hand it over to Art now.
I was the lead artist on Tellus. So right away when we were designing this, we already immediately knew we wanted to do very colorful, very exaggerated art style. One of the things that we had to figure out off the round was, is this going to be a 2D game or a 3D game? So the gameplay itself is pure 2D. So do we want to do 3D or not? And since we're using Unity, all right, let's do 3D. So now initially our art was very, very basic. As you saw, the pitch build in November, the GDC pitch build, all the terrain was flat. Buildings, a lot of them were untextured. They're very, very simple geometry. We eventually, through iteration, changed this. We added a lot more detail. So one of the things that's important for when I was building up the scenes for the art is really just iteration. You just keep building on top of it, like, oh, I think the lighting needs to be changed. Oh, this could use a more detailed texture. Just keep iterating on top of it, and eventually you get something that's better and better and better. There's a lot of little tweaks, a lot of little adjustments that had to be made. You can see this is our actual scene in Unity. So we have a lot of different sort of buildings, terrain, things like that. Even though, as you can see, the art is relatively simple, there's actually a lot of stuff going underneath. So, for example, a regular scene in the game, we got sort of the water, then we got the terrain. The terrain actually has two textures on it. It's got the base color texture, and then it's got a detail texture to add more detail to it. On top of that, we have the lighting, of course, so that and each region has its own unique lighting. We have plans in the future for dynamic lighting, but right now everything's static. On top of that, we also have post-processing effects that includes things like bloom, which really helps sort of soften up the image and makes it feel less computer generated. Then we also, on top of everything all together, we have a color correction pass on everything. And what that does is that helps the entire scene feel very cohesive. And this is another thing that was really interesting is also the animation for the game. Unity has a very robust animation editor, and so all the animation in the game was actually done within Unity. In fact, the animation editor is on the same level as something you find in Maya or Mac, so that was really great. These are some of the buildings that we made. One of the interesting aesthetic decisions we had to make later on was to add these pedestals underneath the buildings. When we switched to 3D terrain, it was very difficult to get buildings to align. So while they looked fine in Maya or something, or Max, when we actually put it in the game, we couldn't get the buildings to line up properly with the terrain. So since this is kind of a board game, this game is very much like a board game. Let's put these little pedestals under there, and they actually are color coded. So another thing is that the colors in the game do help let the player know what it is. Not only works from a visual standpoint, but also just a functionality standpoint. Color. So obviously, health structures as the hospital is red. Things that are under construction are more brown and yellow. Unity has a really great particle effects editor. So we were actually able to create some pretty cool looking particle effects, dynamic animated lights. So some pretty cool stuff. And with that, I'm going to toss it to David.
My name is David Payne. I'm the project director and also another designer on Tellus. I was one of the original members that started on with the team. And from right in the beginning, all we had was Ian's 5-page design doc. And right now our design doc is over 50 pages. Something that really is kind of a testament to the way that this was designed and kind of the creative process that went into it is we knew that we really had to document this down early. It wasn't just jumping through platforms and knowing that we had to get from point A to B. There was a lot of numbers, data, and user interface stuff that had to go into this. And it's really a living document. So if there's one thing out of any design process you should get out of is comment your code first, and second, actually have a working, living design document. I want to talk a little bit about the project itself. I started out as a designer, but I moved into more of a project director role where I was actually kind of bringing the leads together and getting information across. That was one of the really, I think, key things that actually started to build the team as a whole, where we actually had really, I mean, there needs to be someone with some sort of leadership. It's cool to have your friends together, but with us, we weren't friends yet. We were just kind of people working in the same environment. As time grew on, we did kind of come together, and that really kind of gave us a little bit of, I think, an edge when it came to giving our presentation to the school where we were nominated. It's like, hey, we can, submit to the school and possibly get, this shown at the Game Developers Conference. Being on a project is probably one of the more important learning tools you can do at this school. It's scary at first. You may not feel you have the skill to do this. I know I didn't. I felt that, I can't do this. I'm not a part of a team. I don't know these guys. I'm not going to work well. But it's something that you should really force yourselves to do. If you haven't done this yet, it's an awesome, awesome experience. It's where you really do something, and all of a sudden, after you put in all these hours, you realize, like, this actually works. I created something. I can click this, and this actually moves from there to there. It's this magical, wonderful feeling. It's like I did something. Tellus itself really is a really kind of cool evolution where we started out with something very small, very basic, and it moved into something far more complex. Some of the images that were shown before were our IndieDB page, like I mentioned before, which we actually started to do an outreach in the community where we actually gave it to say, hey, gamers, play this, tell us what it is, what's wrong, what we're doing right, and we actually got feedback outside of the school, and that was actually something that's important too, because it's cool to hear something from your friends or your peers, but it's even better when it's someone halfway across the globe says, hey, I like this, or I don't like this, and we started getting international feedback right away, which was actually kind of interesting for us because we broke down the world into 19 different regions. And once we got Tellus out there, we had, I think it was about 17 of the 19 different regions, we had people from those countries responding back to us. I'm like, hey, that's kind of cool. We're kind of checking them off the list. The game itself went into, actually that's not where I wanted to go with that. Go to the GDC thing. One thing I wanted to mention also was our actual pitch to the school for getting into GDC. We actually, let me just switch gears. We're going to go from GDC right there. Once we were at GDC, we were given a lot of help from the school. Part of that was through marketing materials. And that was something that was kind of a pitfall, which Tyler's going to mention in a moment. But one thing, actually, we were given these marketing materials, and we were actually able to pass this out on the show floor with a little bit of trickery and doing. But one of the super awesome things that Tyler did was he got us a gig at the actual Unity booth, where we were actually able to demo on the show floor itself. Which was a huge boost to both our morale and then just being able to get our message out there. So we had real industry people coming in, testing and playing our stuff and giving us direct feedback. I'm going to let Tyler give a little more of a GDC run through.
I'm going to run through the whole process of getting here as Tellus. So a lot of teams here, there's a lot of projects I know going on at the school, and There's a lot of kind of should we go for GDC? What's the point of going to GDC? And obviously, it's very important to go to GDC. It's very important to get your team sponsored, or at least try. When we were first working on this, our primary goal in October was just to get it in on time for the competition. But as soon as the competition was over, we're looking at the end of October, and the GDC pitches were coming up, and we realized, hey, it's only another few weeks. Let's crunch one more time, only 2 more weeks, and let's try again for the GDC sponsorship. We were a little iffy on our chances. We knew about Trade Secret and some of the other teams, and at first we were kind of nervous about it, but what the hell, let's try. So we put together the presentation, and one of the biggest things for our presentation, I think one of our biggest successes, was we practiced our speech. We went over it 4 or 5 times at least. We practiced our transitions. We got ourselves down where it's a fine-tuned thing for that presentation. And that made a big difference. It showed our professionalism. It showed that we knew what we were doing, what we were talking about, and it really helped us to get to GDC and get this sponsorship. But once we did get the sponsorship, we didn't just consider it a victory and end. Like from that point forward, we were like, all right, now we have to have something for GDC. We need to make them get their money's worth. So we went right back into crunch as soon as we won. Round 5, I think, at that point of crunch. Because we knew we were going to be here at GDC showing something off. We were representing UAT and ourselves through this game. We weren't there showing ourselves off as designer or programmer. We were showing off Tellus and the stuff we did on Tellus. So lots of work, put a lot of polish into it. Then once we did get the GDC, what they were talking about before with Unity, I had a chat with some of the guys from Unity, a few of them I knew. So I showed them the game, just got on their computer, showed them the game. They liked it so much that they agreed to let Trade Secret and Tellus just set up in the Unity booth, which was like center of the expo floor. So we were very lucky with that. And one of the big reasons we had that was we already had a bit of a community base. We had stuff online to show. We could show them our IndieDB site. I showed right there, bam, look, 4,000 views in the past week. Like, we're already have some bit of popularity. That gave them the trust that we knew what we were doing and what we were talking about, and allowed us to set up in their booth. So getting that outside community contact, showing off your game, letting people know about it, made a big difference. Show of hands, how many people here did our QA session last semester? So we had about 30 to 40 people from this school alone on one day come and test the game and give us feedback. We probably got about 30 pages of feedback forms from people. We went through, read every single one. Okay, we knew about that, we knew about that. Oh, that one's new, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of the bugs we found and a lot of the work for that next week was correcting the things that we got from those QA feedback. So QA and PR, like, I can't stress enough, and as the QA PR guy, it's kind of self-promotion, but they are important. They get your name out. They really help. They show off, what you have and what needs to be fixed. And I don't think that, we would be here without it. But at the same time, like, you need a proper team of hardworking people to have something to QA and PR. So it is a mixed bag on that. I'm going to send it back to David now.
I just wanted to elaborate one thing that Tyler said, and it's something that's been gone around, and I think it's something that everyone kind of goes into thinking back as a freshman. It's like, oh, if I have a game idea, I have to have everyone sign an NDA. It's secret. I can't tell anyone because they're going to steal it. And that's something that we didn't do from Tellus from the start. It was very public and open, and if you want to know about it, please come talk to us. Because it really doesn't serve any purpose to hide your idea or your game from anyone else, because you can't do it all on your own. If you can, that's awesome, and you should come work for us because we got plenty of work for you. But really, elaborating on what he said, if you have an idea, just go out there, see if it works, create a prototype for it, which is actually one of the pitfalls that we fell into because we had such a strict deadline in the beginning. We really didn't get a chance to do some of the really core design things that we should have done, like have a real proper prototype, go in and actually see what works, what doesn't. And that might be something you run into in the industry as well when you're out there and you say, oh, you have a deadline, you have to do, this amount of work in 1 month. I mean, that's what you got to do. You got to roll with it. Wanted to go over on the next slide. You advance it, please.
We didn't talk about this.
You didn't mention
Oh yeah, I forgot the plug. Yeah. So
this is important.
while we were at the Unity booth, we hung out, showed our game off to a lot of people. We got approached from Anthony and Augusta from Congregate, interested in potentially releasing the game on Congregate. So we were like, oh wow, what? Publishing? We're gonna sell this? Oh crap. So that's been a big pressure for us now that we actually got approached. I also scheduled a private meeting with Valve for both Trade Secret and Tellus. So we had a private sit down with them, showed the game off to their release coordinator, decides what goes on Steam. And they told both teams, like, you finish this and it's possible, but we can't make the decision until it's done. But they liked it, so that looks good. So now we have Steam and Congregate as two options. We also got approached by 3 other publishers that were no one we had actually heard of, but nonetheless they were still interested. So within GDC we had 5 different publishers conversations with, which kind of made us realize that, wait a second, this is no longer just a student project. It's bigger than we expected, and now we have to continue that. Like, we can't just let it drop off. So that really kind of applied the pressure to keep it going. That leads into the future.
Yep. And also with the Design 3 right there, just because we had a larger presence, since we actually were in a real booth and we weren't just hiding in the shadows, we were approached by the people who were just adjacent to Unity 3. Design 3 is a company that actually provides online tutorials for several different products. I've used some of them myself, but they actually wanted to interview developers there, like independent developers that were actually using either their software or just the methods, the engines that they were providing tutorials for information. So at some point they're going to have a feature with some of the people I was interviewed, as well as Ian, to talk about.
There for Trade Secret.
Yeah, and I went through the Trade Secret team, just as a feature thing. So really, kind of taking, or just being at GDC itself is cool, being able to see everything, but being able to actually have something to show, to actually either showcase yourself and do it, it makes you feel kind of like, there's that one moment where you're just walking in the halls, like, I'm actually here, this is where I wanted to be, where I always dreamed of being. I'm actually going to do something that's, might be important. On to the future. Future is a very dark slide. It's the unknown. It's the scary part because it's tomorrow. And as much as we like to plan for it, there is a whole lot left to do. We are, of course, always interested in new people in our team. We're actually a very small team compared to Trade Secret. They have some 20-some odd members, and we have about a core team of about like 8 to 10 people. We've been working really hard with that, but we are always looking for more talent, whether it's art, programming, even design. There's people who want to work and get their hands on it. Ideas we have for the future. We were approached by one of the engineers from Google, and they gave us some UI suggestions, some other things. There's a lot of different features we're going to incorporate into the game with the day and night cycle. There's model work, texture work to be done, and just a lot of game balancing too. It is going to be pretty cool. Did you have anything you wanted to add on to that? No? Okay. You want to share some takeaway things from GDC?
I got plenty. All right, first off, present yourself. That's the obvious one. Everyone should know that. But really, so having a project, going to GDC last year, going to GDC this year, the one thing I took away from this year was that having a project that's polished and already visible on sites with you, with your teammates, that means all the world at GDC. Going to GDC just by yourself with a couple business cards, going to meet people is difficult because you are one of thousands of other students just like that. Coming to GDC where you're a project team, now you're in the elite. Now you're with those people that are showing off projects. You are one of them, and you're treated that way. We went to Unity's party. A large group of us were at their special, closed door party, and we got to hang out with these Unity guys and talk with them. And they weren't talking to a student. They were talking to a developer using their software. Like, they treated us like that. That was the conversations we were having, was about using their software and things that we've learned from it and things we'd like to see changed. And we were treated on equal ground, which made all the difference. So my first advice to anyone who goes to GDC is to have a project to show. If you don't have one, find a project and work your butt off to be valuable enough to be on that team. Because as soon as you have that value to a team, such as Tellus or Trade Secret or any other project, as soon as you can show that you have what it takes to be part of that team and you're part of that team, and you help them get the GDC, you're made. Like, that makes you a step above any other student who just went on their own. So that's number one most crucial thing, is get on a project and make it kick ass.
Actually, one more thing I would like to mention actually is really your commitment when you're working on the project. It's very important that the more time you put into it, the better it's going to be. I know it sounds obvious, but a some students I've seen here, you know, they'll be like, you know, I don't, I can work on the project in my spare time. I don't feel like doing it. When you want to make a project to go to GDC, it's not a hobby. It's your job. Treat it like your job. Treat it like your profession. You know, during our crunch time, and we were putting, you know, 6 to 8 hours a day at least for like the last week or last couple of weeks actually. So, you know, if you want to make a project, you know, be serious about it. Don't just, oh, you know, this would be kind of cool. No, you know, actually do it, and actually make sure you have a lot of time to work on it. So.
Wanted to answer any questions if there were some in the back.
Did you guys ever feel that the contest guidelines ever sort of put a limit on your creative ability in the game?
It really did, because there was a lot of restrictions in the beginning. Like, it had to be web-based, it had to be for a specific audience. It wasn't just, hey guys, let's get together on Saturday and make this game where we can do whatever we want. Because there were specific guidelines, but at the same time, that really gave us a drive and purpose. So we had to have specific deliverables by certain times. They had to meet certain criteria. It was a little bit of a stifle on some creative things, because we knew we couldn't, you know, we knew we couldn't have tanks and awesome stuff like that, and you know, all the fun stuff.
That was a good thing. It kept our scope down, which was very important for the project.
Right, but that was the other thing. You know, we couldn't just say, hey, let's just put in all this awesome stuff. We knew what we had to do, so we did it. Yes?
So this game is playable. I could go to Congregate or even just like the
You can go to our IndieDB site or play.tellus or playtell.us. I always get that wrong. All right, playtell.us or the IndieDB site and play it from there. We always have a download available. It might not be the most current version because we do milestone releases every couple weeks or every couple months. But I know our GDC build is still up if you want to try it. And we have feedback forms if you want to tell us what you thought about it. Just tell us about Tellus.
Or report bugs.
specific graphical requirements, because I don't have like a super awesome graphics card.
No, it's since it's built kind of for the web.
You just got
There
a
it
free
is.
copy of the game.
Yeah, it is in an alpha state, so there's still little quirks in there, but it is, no, it's fully playable. It's playable in by really a minimum spec computer. Should run about 30 frames a second on most systems.
Anybody else want to ask a question?
Lots of
I know starting out on Unity, how much did you know about Unity, and if you were to tell us over again right now with all the experience that you had with Unity, do you think that it would be better? Would you implement more stuff, or, you know?
I knew a little bit going in. I'd done some tutorials myself. A lot of people didn't know it. We basically had a few programmers and a few other people. So our first few weeks of development were doing tutorials, just running through stuff, getting the feel for it. But the engine itself is really awesome. It's really plug and play. You can just pick up anything, throw it into it, and just start animating, adding scripts to it. It's really a low-level thing. If I was going to do anything differently from the start, I don't know. We made pretty good progress.
I think from an art perspective, going into Unity, I knew nothing. This project is my first time ever using Unity. And so originally I was very hands-off with the engine. I'd make the art asset and then I'd give it to the programmer. And it's like, you deal with it in the engine. But then as I started playing around in Unity, like, I don't need to talk to them. I can just do it in Unity. It's very, very user-friendly. If you're not a programmer, Unity's great. So yeah, knowing what I know now, I'd spend a lot more time in the Unity engine itself rather than being hands-off and just doing all my work in Photoshop or Maya. So.
I'm going to grab you in the back, and we'll go over here.
What would you say is Unity's greatest limitation, and what is their greatest, benefit from using it?
Limitation-wise, from what I've heard, it's actually some of the networking code in it. The trade secret teams had kind of a beast of a time getting that working. We haven't had that so much because ours is a single-player experience. Benefit is definitely ease of use and publishing. It goes out to so many different platforms right now, and also the licensing that goes with it. They don't charge you, huge fees based on if you want to actually sell a product. And it's a really awesome community to learn from. You can easily go on and look up resources, and there's people sharing stuff all the time, as well as now a built-in asset store which you can get things right away from.
And that company, Design3, they offer us a discount for students to get their tutorial materials. And the code's actually in the student forums in the game design and programming thread somewhere.
art-wise, in terms of limitations for Unity, Unity is from an artistic perspective, it's pretty powerful. You can do dynamic lights, normal maps, bump maps. There are some quirks with the way light mapping works. So if you're going to use heavy use of light mapping, you may have better luck with UDK. Also, the way shaders work, it isn't like UDK where you can just create your own materials. You got to program them yourself. You have to actually write the shaders. So that's one limitation to work with if you're doing art or if you're a design major.
In the back in the gray shirt.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't really coming a little bit late, but I don't think I heard anything about how sound was handled. Do you guys have sound or music or anything?
You know, and that was actually one thing that, kind of going back on that, if there's one thing I could do over again is getting sound back in the game much quicker. We didn't have audio until very late into our builds. It's really easy to implement into the system. There's multiple ways of doing it. One thing that we had was kind of or it's implemented, but it's not fully realized, is dynamically changing music throughout the game based on situations. Getting it in the game was really easy. It was just always pushed back based on the resources that we had. Is there any something more specific on it, or?
Oh, I just mean like, I didn't really hear if you guys talked about what exactly your sound looked like.
Well, neither of our sound guys are here right now. We had two, one for music and one more for sound effects. But then the music guy kind of dropped off as we moved into a new semester or a new milestone, and we just had the sound guy. But we had them creating music just kind of based on, we're going to need music that kind of sounds like this, and like, well, how does this sound? I worked closely with the guy doing the music, but we still need to polish it.
Brown jacket.
What were some of the big problems you guys had making the game? Like, I don't know, like technical problems. Did anything totally like hit you like a brick wall? Like, oh, we have this glitch and it's tearing everything apart.
One thing I would say is the way Unity handles transparency, because we had in our environments we had these clouds, we had all these sort of particle effects, and for whatever reason there are some quirks in the way Unity renders things, and so like if a cloud was up here and something was down here, this would render first, or actually last, and so you'd get flickering graphically. So we had to work around that, work around the shaders.
A lot of fun bugs, sideways
a lot of
models,
bugs.
things going through the earth. I wish we had a demo reel of all the horrible things that happened. Yeah, you please. We got about 5 more minutes for questions.
Programming wise, what are some of the big like brick walls you kind of hit with that?
Having one programmer that was resident, he was kind of like our programming god who did everything. Another person was off-site, since we had distance students as well. I would say some of the biggest challenges that we had were getting the UI to function properly with different things. At one point, we rewrote the whole system. I wish we had our programmer here to elaborate on that. But there's been a few goofs, but he's really been able to overcome a lot of stuff.
What are some plans, if you guys don't mind sharing, like about getting the game out, getting more people to want to play it? Like any things you have for the community to reward them? I know you talked about Steam. Other stuff like that.
There's we've talked about things like achievement systems, other things in the game. We wanted to definitely grow our community on IndieDB and other social sites. It's going to be a free-to-play game. It's the possibility of maybe charging something future, but we just want to get it out there. But basically, it's just being able to keep in contact with people on the outside through the internet.
How does the user interface and all of that kind of stuff compare with other web-based content like Flash and that kind of stuff?
As far as getting it into the game or the actual using it?
As far as just like the whole Unity.
Unity has several different ways of doing it. Apparently there's been some complaints about how it handles it. You can use it has an actual structure in there that has its own kind of shaders to make custom buttons and everything. We use that to an extent, but then we put our own graphics on top of that. There's different icon states, ways of interacting, passing the data through. It's almost, from my understanding of it, just being on a design side, it's almost like having a style sheet in a web page. At some point you can actually lay it out invisibly in the background and plug things into it. There's a lot of different ways of doing it.
From a management perspective, were there people that hopped on the project and didn't end up doing anything? And if so, how quickly did you cut them from the project?
There wasn't really anyone who was there. There was never anyone fired from Tellus. In the beginning, we really didn't have a manager at all, And so it was a lot of just things. Of course, there's always overachievers, and there's people that are underperforming.
I fired somebody.
Yeah, actually we did. Or you did. It's really depending on your level of investment in it. Some people were taking the class as credit. So if you're not performing there, then there's repercussions for that. If there's someone who's doing it out of the goodness of their heart, it's do what you want. But at the same time, that was kind of my job. I wanted to make sure that people were able to contribute as much as they felt comfortable with, and they weren't overburdened on that. Because some people have all day and all night, other people don't. So it's definitely not a very browbeating, bad environment we created.
The main thing is that you make a commitment and you stick to it. So if your commitment is 10 hours a week, then we expect 10 hours a week. If your commitment's 10 hours a month, that's fine. Just stick to that.
I think we can grab 2 more questions here, and then of course you can please find us at any time and talk to us. We meet in 106 on Tuesday evenings, Friday evenings, and Saturday evenings. You and then...
From a game design perspective, what was the major roles you guys did? Was it a lot of number crunching, getting the stuff to work that way, or was it more of implementing the art assets and programming to make sure everything just worked how it did?
I would say more of the latter, because it is actually a number-heavy game, because the stats that we used were actually based off either real-world values, populations, growth, weather. So a lot of it was getting the idea, the concept of which we originally had, creating the art for it, or at least placeholder art, getting it so it's interactive in the way that we thought it should be, and then dumping in numbers into it. So
there's a lot more balance, trying to make sure the numbers worked correctly.
right, and a lot of that's a challenge too, because we couldn't just say, oh, this is 5 and this is 10 and we're good. It's this is supposed to represent 8 million people here. How do we do that versus a country on the other side of the world which has 2 billion people? It's like, how do we make sure that this small African section of the world is something that someone wants to play with, as opposed to just sitting in the U.S. and playing with all the stuff over there. So it's definitely a work in progress.
This one will probably sound a little bit odd, but if Tellus were to go full scale and actually get the marketing congregates team and all of that, what would you guys worry about, things like piracy, torrenting, and all that stuff? I mean, would you think that would actually cut into the bottom line, or would you guys be more like, well, with the content of this game, we wouldn't think that people would tend to distribute it like that a lot?
I'll take this. All right. So first off, if people steal our game, good, let them. I want everyone to torrent this game because that's more people playing our game. As students, I don't care. That's more publicity. Like, if my game becomes wildly torrented right now and 10 million people have played it, that is a success as far as I'm concerned. That's mostly going to be the publisher's issue. So if we go out, put it on Valve and it gets stolen, that's, Steam's cut is being really hurt more than us. Considering right now the game is free and you can play on a website, torrenting it is just another way of getting it. If we do go to a site like Valve, we'll have to pull all online versions of it. We'll have to take it off the internet. We'll basically make it disappear specifically so it's exclusive to them. But if it's something like Congregate, the way Congregate and other sites like that work is they deal in exclusivity rights. So they get exclusivity to the game for 5 months, 6 months, 6 years, whatever. So they basically are the only site that has it for X amount of time before we can start talking to other sites. So the situation with that is that torrenting it or stealing it would not be of any concern because it's Congregate's hits that are being hurt. At that point, our money has already been handed to us. So I would not even think about that or worry about that as a student developer, because the more people who steal your game, the more publicity your game has,
The
which
more
is what
people
we
that
want
see
right
your
now.
name.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up, I wanted to get your question there.
You mentioned that your document grew quite a bit throughout the project. What did you do to make sure that everyone was up to date on what the new design document looked like? How did you keep everyone up to date on?
We used 2 tools. The first one, for that, we actually have our document in Google Docs, and we were able to edit and share that in real time. So everyone knows where it is, they have access to it, and they can make changes on the fly. I think that was a really good idea to have something where we can have a living document that isn't, housed in a specific place. Also, our game was using the SVN subversion checkout, where you can actually have our game out in the cloud and people can download it, make changes, upload it without overwriting other people's work. So we were able to,
Not always.
if you're careful, But the Unity Pro version has that built into it, so you can actually use that, and that was a really great way to keep our stuff updating constantly without having to have a bottleneck on one specific person. I think they want to get us on out of here for the next people, so please, if you have more questions, find us. We're going to be around. We're students too.